Jungles don't just hide things, they erase them. A city can be abandoned, and within a few generations, the forest starts doing what it does best: pulling vines across stone, pushing roots through walls, filling plazas with leaf litter, burying roads under soil that looks perfectly natural. The map goes blank, and then the stories begin: myths, rumors, lost cities, and the kind of legends that sound too neat to be true. But every so often, something breaks through. A bulldozer hits masonry where no one expects masonry. A farmer clears brush and finds carvings that don't belong there. A pilot looks down and sees geometry where there should only be green. And suddenly the history books, written from what we can see, have to answer a brutal question. What else did we miss? Today we're diving into 8 finds under jungles that didn't just add details to the past, they forced whole civilizations to be reimagined. Cambodia, Angkor's hidden city grid. Start in Cambodia because this is the ultimate we thought we knew and we didn't. For years, Angkor was famous for the big headline temples: Angkor Wat, Bayon, Ta Prohm, stone icons rising out of the forest. Tourists came, took photos, left with the feeling that Angkor was a collection of monuments. Then the jungle gave up a different truth: not just temples, a city system. Using airborne laser scanning, LiDAR, researchers began peeling away the canopy digitally and revealing the shape of what lies beneath: roads, canals, embankments, ponds, and the hard geometry of planned urban space extending far beyond what the naked eye could connect from the ground. It's one thing to know a civilization built monumental temples. It's another to realize those temples were only the visible peaks of an engineered landscape, an entire urban network designed to move water, manage farmland, and support populations on a scale that doesn't fit the old lost in the jungle stereotype. Angkor didn't become bigger, it became more modern. And once you see that grid under the trees, you can't unsee it. The jungle wasn't hiding isolated ruins, it was hiding infrastructure. And that changes the next question from how did they build this temple to how did they run this city? Because the moment you find urban planning under a jungle, the past stops being romantic and starts being logistical. Now imagine the same shock, but on a different continent, where people once claimed, confidently, that the rainforest couldn't support large, complex societies at all. Bolivia, the Llanos de Mojos earthworks. In the Bolivian Amazon, the Llanos de Mojos looks like flat green wilderness. And for a long time, the old story went like this: the Amazon was too harsh, too nutrient poor, too wild to sustain dense settlements and intensive agriculture. People could live there, sure, but not at scale, not in complexity, not in the kinds of systems you'd compare to the great urban cultures elsewhere. Then the ground began to contradict the theory. Causeways, raised roads crossing wetlands, canals and ditches, geometric mounds, and vast networks of raised fields, earth built up to manage water and soil in a landscape that floods. This isn't a single temple, it's landscape engineering. And it's the kind of evidence that forces a rewrite. If you can build agriculture into wetlands and link settlements with raised roads, then the rainforest isn't just a barrier. It's a place people learn to operate like an instrument. The Amazon stops being a blank green backdrop. It becomes an archive. And as soon as you accept that, you start seeing the jungle differently. Not as untouched nature, but as a place where human decisions can be written into the land for centuries. Now, if that idea makes you uncomfortable, wait until we go to Guatemala, where one jungle find was so extensive it turned into a new mental image of an entire civilization. Guatemala. Maya. Megacities revealed by LiDAR. For decades, the Maya were often described with an emphasis on their ceremonial centers. Towering pyramids in the forest, mysterious kings, mathematics, astronomy, and cities that felt like sacred islands in a sea of green. Then LiDAR arrived again, and the jungle's camouflage started failing. Suddenly, the map was full of things you can't easily dismiss as small settlements: causeways linking centers, dense residential patterns, defensive walls, terracing, reservoirs, and the signatures of a society that was not only building temples, but building everything around them. From the ground, you can hike for days and see nothing but trees. From the air, once the canopy is digitally removed, you're staring at the skeleton of a human world. The biggest shock isn't that the Maya were advanced. We already knew that. The shock is the scale of the everyday city: housing, roads, and fortification. History books didn't exactly lie, they just couldn't see what the jungle was sitting on. And once you see a lost city become a lost urban region, a new suspicion creeps in. How many other civilizations are still mismeasured because their infrastructure is still under leaves? Now, let's move from LiDAR to something more personal. Something found the old-fashioned way with sweat, machetes, and a ruin that refuses to fit neatly into the story people tell about its region. Honduras, the lost city of La Mosquitia. Deep in the Mosquitia region of Honduras, stories of a lost city circulated for generations. Sometimes called the White City, Ciudad Blanca, a place half legend, half obsession. Expeditions tried. People got sick. The jungle pushed back. The story kept floating between myth and archaeology. Then, in the 21st century, remote sensing surveys identified anomalies in the landscape, shapes that didn't match natural terrain. And when teams went in, they documented features consistent with human construction, plazas, earthworks, and carved stone objects. The controversy wasn't whether something was there. It was what it meant, how old it was, who built it, and whether the media hype got ahead of the careful science. And that tension is exactly why it belongs in this video. Because the Mosquitia find isn't just wow ruins, it's a modern lesson in how history is made. Discovery, interpretation, argument, and the slow conversion of legend into evidence. The jungle doesn't just hide the past, it also tempts the present into telling stories too fast. Now, to prove that jungles don't only hide cities, sometimes they hide entire writing systems that reframe how we think about early power. Mexico, La Mojara Stela, and the Epi Olmec script. In the lowlands of Veracruz, Mexico, a stone monument known as the La Mojara Stela carries inscriptions that became a major piece in understanding a lesser-known writing tradition, often discussed as part of the Epi Olmec, or Isthmian, script tradition. This is the kind of treasure that isn't gold, it's language.
Because when you find a stela with long text, you're not just finding art. You're finding bureaucracy, history, ideology, the evidence that rulers were recording events, names, and time in ways that imply administration and complexity. It pushes against a simplistic, early cultures were mostly oral assumption and forces a more nuanced view of who was writing, when, and why. And once an inscription enters the picture, the jungle stops being just a physical barrier. It becomes a barrier between us and meaning. If a city tells you where people lived, an inscription tells you what they believed was important enough to carve into stone. Next, we go to India, where a jungle find did something rare. It didn't expand a known civilization, it complicated it. India. Angkor-like ruins in the forests of central India. Across parts of India, dense forests and rugged terrain have preserved temples and ancient structures that were never fully integrated into mainstream narratives for a long time. Not because they were unimportant, but because access, documentation, and sustained excavation were difficult. In some cases, ruins emerged during roadwork, village expansion, or forestry surveys. Stone pillars, carved blocks, temple bases, revealing that areas considered peripheral had deep histories of settlement, religion, and trade. The defy history books moment here is subtle but powerful. The center of the story shifts. Instead of one golden age concentrated in one well-mapped corridor, you get networks, smaller powers, forgotten patrons, and sacred landscapes that don't line up with the simplified textbook map. The jungle doesn't only hide lost cities, it hides lost chapters. Now, let's go back to Southeast Asia, because one jungle find reveals a different kind of sophistication. Not the grandeur of temples, but the genius of water. Sri Lanka, Sigiriya and the hidden hydraulic landscape. Sigiriya is famous for its rock fortress, a dramatic monolith rising above the forest, with ruins and gardens that look like something placed there on purpose to make you feel small. What's easy to miss in the fortress story is how much of Sigiriya's brilliance is environmental engineering. Designed gardens, water features, and planning that require deep understanding of hydrology and terrain.
A jungle can make ancient water systems disappear because channels silt up, ponds turn into marsh, and vegetation makes intentional lines look like random depressions. When you trace the layout, you realize you're not looking at decorative landscaping. You're looking at control of water, space, and movement. It defies the lazy idea that ancient architecture was just stonework. It was systems thinking. And systems thinking is exactly what leads to our final find, the one that forces the biggest question of all. What if the jungle is not swallowing history? What if the jungle is protecting evidence that we're still not psychologically ready to measure? The Amazon, geoglyphs, and the myth of untouched wilderness. In parts of the Amazon basin, especially in areas where modern deforestation has exposed the ground, researchers have documented geometric earthworks, geoglyphs, Massive shapes cut into the earth, circles, squares, connecting lines, patterns that can only really be understood from above. The chilling part is that many of these become visible only after the forest is removed, which means the jungle wasn't hiding them by accident. It was hiding them by being alive. This find doesn't just add more ruins. It threatens one of the most comfortable myths modern people carry, that there are places on Earth that have always been pure wilderness, never shaped by humans. Geoglyphs are proof of intention, and intention implies society. And society implies the past was busier than we thought. So when people say the Amazon is untouched, the ground itself argues back. Not with words, with geometry. The most unsettling thing about jungle discoveries isn't what we find. It's what it implies. Because every time the canopy lifts, through LiDAR, through excavation, through sheer accident, it reveals the same truth. History isn't missing because it didn't happen. History is missing because it got covered. And somewhere under the world's remaining jungles, there are still shapes no one has mapped, roads no one has walked, and names no one has translated, waiting for the moment the green finally gives them back.